It is just a huge honor today to be sitting in my home with Richard Thomas, who is a lawyer. Rick and his family have lived in Ahwatukee since 1996. He has been practicing law for more than 34 years. He received his undergraduate degree from Brigham Young University in 1980 and his law degree from Washington and Lee University in Lexington, Virginia in 1983. He practiced law for 7 years in Atlanta, Georgia, and the remaining 27 years have been here in Arizona. He spent more than a year as the CEO of Delta Dental Plan of Arizona in 1999 to 2000, during a very challenging time in that company's history. He is the managing partner of the Phoenix office of Smith LC, a law firm headquartered in Irvine, California, with offices in Irvine, Phoenix, Provo, Utah, and soon to be Jackson, Wyoming. Rick's practice emphasizes state and federal litigation cases and trials involving investment fraud, intellectual property disputes, and professional advisor liability. Most of Rick's practice focuses on representation of plaintiffs. Rick and his wife Lily are the parents of 5 kids, all graduates of either Mountain Pointe or Desert Vista, and grandparents of 10 grandkids, none of whom live in Arizona. Is that a blessing or a curse they don't live here?
It's a curse.
It's a curse?
Yeah.
What type of law, let's bring it home local. What type of cases are you doing from the good citizens of Ahwatukee? What kind of problems are they bringing you?
Well, the kind of problems that a lot of folks have relate to normal interactions you have as a consumer. For example, you go buy an RV, and the RV turns out to be a lemon. What do you do with that? You have somebody who, for some reason, you get into a war of words on Facebook or whatever it would be, and somebody says not just mean things about you, but false things about you. That defamation is something that happens a lot these days, more and more with the social media. A lot of up-and-coming entrepreneurs or inventors who have trade secrets who they either need to have protected, or someone has taken it, or someone has forced a contract on them. A lot of those kinds of interactions create conflict, and that's where we get involved to try to either resolve it, well, to one way or the other, either resolving it amicably or non-amicably in the litigation sense, not,
So
not in the old kind of sense.
Do you actually take cases all the way to court yourself?
Oh, yeah.
So I heard one time that only 1% of lawyers actually will litigate a trial.
Well, I think the percentage, relates to the number of cases that get to a trial, and I think it's between 2 and 5% of cases that are ever filed in the civil context actually get to trial. It's much higher than that in criminal cases, just because prosecutors want to put people in jail.
But what percent of the lawyers doing those cases? How many lawyers are in the United States? 1 million?
I have no idea. Too many people would say.
1 million. What percent of those million attorneys would actually litigate a trial?
I don't know. I think it's an overwhelming minority of the lawyers, a very low percentage, I would say, actually litigate. Some lawyers call themselves litigators, and some lawyers call themselves trial lawyers. I'm a trial lawyer. Was also a litigator because you resolve disputes, you get in and you file claims, you file cases. But can you take that case all the way through trial? And that's what we do.
So again, what's the difference between a litigator and a trial lawyer? A trial is someone who'll take it all the way through trial.
All the way through trial.
And the litigator wants to be that 95% of cases that settle out of court.
Either that, or they don't go into trial and actually pick a jury and make opening statements and examine witnesses. They do all the work leading up to that. They'll take depositions, file pleadings, file briefs, things like that, but they don't actually get into court and stand up in front of a jury.
So, McDonald's sells a hamburger, frying a Coke. I'm a dentist. We do, root canal, filling a crown. What would be your 5 top things on your menu that you're doing?
We do settlement negotiations. We do filing claims. We do mediation, we do arbitration, and we go all the way to trial. Those are kind of the general categories of what litigators usually do. There's a whole lot of categories of things that get involved, but we do the whole thing. And
One of the reasons I want to get you on the show is, Ahwatukee, there's a lot of retirees, and a lot of them got their pension, came here at 65, buy a house. I mean, I've been watching them for 30 years, and a lot of people always say, they're afraid of a broker, or that they don't know what to do with their pension because they see so many news stories, that there's a lot of fraud. If Grandma and Grandpa just got to Ahwatukee, they're 65, they just rolled in from North Dakota, they got their pension, how do they find an advisor that's not a crook?
first of all, 65 is kind of young to be, doing that. I'm 62, so.
I'm 55. You already got 10 grandchildren. I got a mess of them too.
That's a good question because one of the things the government has done that helps people out is to require licensing. And this is the same for brokers, same for investment advisors. There are federal and state requirements for people who hold themselves out as experts. You have to find somebody who's licensed. If you decide what you're going to do is let, Uncle Frank handle your finances for you, make all your investment decisions for you, because you don't want to go out and pay a brokerage fee or a commission or something, unfortunately, sometimes you get what you pay for there. And either bad investments or Uncle Frank decides he's going to be, a little fast and loose with the bookkeeping. But even that sometimes isn't a guarantee. People like Bernie Madoff never made one trade. And so he fooled a lot of people for a long time. And I've heard a lot of other horror stories, and this is one of the areas that we get significantly involved in, where someone loses their entire retirement because they didn't either pick the right person or they didn't watch them closely enough. Some people, when they choose an investment advisor, they simply, I think, decide, I'm going to let them do all the decision making. I'm going to give them complete discretion to make investments, which is usually not the best advice as far as I'm concerned. You need to keep control over, and you need to get your investment advisor should be going back to you for approval to make changes in your investments.
Did you watch the Bernie Madoff show? I think there was two.
With De Niro?
One was on HBO and one was on Showtime, or
I saw the one with the De Niro.
Yeah. What I thought was the most interesting is how he would never pitch his product. He would, you want to come to dinner with him, he'd talk about everything. Yeah. You had to ask him. That was the psychological warfare. But what could a citizen of Ahwatukee have done to avoid a Bernie Madoff?
Well, I like to think that they should consult somebody, probably a lawyer, if they're going to invest any sizable sum, to have the lawyer review the documents that are describing the investment and to insist on a monthly accounting of what's happening and to get somebody involved in your process who has what's called professional skepticism. Because when I see an investment pitch in documents that clients bring in, describing these investments, it sounds nice, but in the back of my mind, I'm trained as a lawyer. I'm just, I guess, maybe naturally skeptical too as a person through experience. I have to say, well, wait a minute, that sounds a little bit too good to be true. We need to make them show us that. So you need somebody, and they could have done a lot more to hold Madoff accountable. In fact, that's ultimately what undid him, is that people were demanding accountability, and it's the way it always is. Several years ago in the Arizona, Phoenix metropolitan area, there was a company called Mortgages Limited.
Mortgages Limited?
Right. And the founder of Mortgages Limited ended up committing suicide, but it stranded literally hundreds of investors who had not exercise that kind of skepticism or didn't have somebody who they'd hired. And so as a result, their money was being used for all kinds of improper purposes. And that was back in 2008, and we represented about 80 investors who lost about $130 million.
Man.
And because they took their eye off the ball, a lot of them lost everything they had.
So-
Some of professionals who lost everything they had, all of a sudden, 65 years old, you got nothing.
So so she just got her pension. She sold the family farm. She's now in Ahwatukee. Are you someone that she could call that you would give them a name of an investment broker?
I'd give them a name. I wouldn't give them investment advice, but I'd say, look, let's talk to 2 or 3 different people. Let's find out what their
They
ideas
live in
are.
Ahwatukee?
Oh yeah.
Send them here.
Okay.
Send them here. I want to hear, because this is a very common question I get.
Yeah.
I mean, Ahwatukee, by the time you get down to Mountain Park Ranch and the foothills, you think it's just the same as Chandler or Glendale.
Right.
But when you're at 48th Street in LA, where my practice is, I mean, there's a lot of retirees around there. I mean, it's a very common question. And not to throw anybody to the bus and make it sound weird, but if you drive around Ahwatukee, you always see all these Edward Jones.
Yep.
So they're always asking, well, do you use Edward Jones? How would you answer that question?
Do I use Edward Jones?
Well, I mean, if someone just sold their family farm
Yeah.
here and said, well, I mean, and you're driving around Ahwatukee, they don't want to commute downtown
Right.
Phoenix. So, but the only investment thing you really see out of your automobile windshield are Edward Jones. I mean, there must be. How many of them are there in Ahwatukee?
There's a lot. In fact, there's one down the hall from my office.
Yeah, there's a lot of them. So that's a very common question. Is that where you go? Is that where you recommend?
It's a very reputable place. So my investment advisor actually doesn't live in Ahwatukee. He lives in just north of Tempe. But there are the Edward Jones type establishments here in the Ahwatukee area, usually around along Chandler Boulevard or up along Elliott.
To work there, would they all have to be licensed?
Yes. Well, to be an investment advisor, the kind you want, yes.
But you'll send a couple to my house?
I'll send a couple of them to your house.
Send a couple, because it's a very common question.
Yeah.
Ahwatukee's got a lot of different communities in it.
Yeah, it does.
I mean, but around here, it's a lot of retirees.
Yeah, there are, and it's
Yeah.
a good question.
We're going to put this on a social media site called Tukeetown, and so have you actually had a case of defamation of character from social media?
We've had several of them. Yeah.
No kidding.
Yeah.
Tell us the details.
Well, in general, I won't give you specifics of names.
No, we want their name, phone number. No.
A lot of it has to do with taking your personal disputes onto social media. So a friend or an ex-wife or an ex-spouse, I should say,
That's usually a red flag.
posts on either Facebook or Twitter or some other social media site that my ex-spouse is a lying cheater, something to that effect, a dishonest person. And it's seen by how many thousands of people. Depends on how many friends you have. But all of your social media friends are going to read that. And those kinds of things can create serious harm to a reputation for somebody if that's all someone's reading. So that happens actually quite a bit, either in a business context, a former business partner who wants to get back at somebody, or somebody who's upset with somebody who sold them something in commerce, that this person cheated me. More and more, and this is going to happen, you're seeing it right now in late 2017 there. In fact, even today, Facebook and Twitter and Google are sitting in front of a Senate committee talking about content. And the Senate and Congress is, I think, starting to circle the wagons on, we're going to have to regulate this. You can't just have the Wild West out there, people saying and posting anything they want. But unfortunately, right now they do, and that creates all kinds of problems. And you can get sued for defamation for doing that. I think people think it's like whispering something over the phone to somebody, but you can say something defamatory to to someone, if it's just to them and it's about them, it's not defamatory because it's just to them. If it goes to 57 other neighbors, that's defamation. So you got a problem. And that's something that people just aren't aware of yet.
Well, I want to say one. Someone called me a short, fat guy on social media.
Oh, well, you need to prove it. You need to prove that untrue.
Yeah, I don't know how I'm going to unprove that. You have a stretcher you can stretch?
You should try my patented 6-word diet.
6-word diet?
It's patented 6-word diet.
What is it?
Shut the pie hole and swim.
Oh, you always saw me out in the swimming pool. Yeah, we've swam 1,000 times in a lifetime. You're a damn good swimmer, and very disciplined. Back and forth, back and forth. So I in my lifetime, it seems like the only contribution social media has made is a destruction of trust. I mean, there's so much fake news, and you see these studies that say like over 90% of all the news stories shared on Facebook, the original person that shared it didn't even open and read it.
Yeah.
So they're just sharing, what do they call it, clickbait headlines, but it seems like there's a lot more. My brother and I were talking about that for an hour last night, that it just seems like there's just more distrust now in society than there was 10, 20, 30 years ago. Or is that just part of being a grandpa where you look back in your earlier years? Do you think I'm just looking back at the good old days, or do you think it's the same?
No, I think it's worse. I think you're right. I think social media and the immediacy of social media, I think, is conditioning people to think of important items in 140-word bites or in headlines and in immediate clickbait kind of attention. And so that's what our attention span is developing into, and so that's what gets our attention. It's a dangerous thing because it causes people to really ignore the warning signs for things that are just completely false. Fake news. Whoever invented that phrase.
Well, I mean, these guys will say these, I mean, it's really, the thing I think I like about it the most is to find out how many of your friends who you think, well, you can get accepted into dental school, graduated dentist, and be a crackpot. But when I see how many of my dentist friends believe in every crackpot conspiracy theory, investing in Bitcoin, I mean, you're just like, dude, how did you learn how to do a root canal? and are sharing these crackpot deals, which leads me to my next question. How does someone listening right now make sure their investment opportunity is legit? We're talking about fake news, and so someone's got an investment opportunity. How does she determine if that's legit?
Well, it requires, especially if it's a significant sum of money. I mean, if you're talking
what does
about,
that mean to you?
if you're talking about $100, you're going to, invest in something or give somebody to go, build a summer lawn mowing business or something like that. That's not obviously what you're talking about. You're talking about investing $1,000, $2,000, $3,000 in something that you're going to wait around for a return on. The first thing that has to happen, I think, as I mentioned, you need the advice of someone other than you, who does it for a living, and who is accountable to someone for their professional credentials, whether it's a CPA, professional investment advisor. But the other thing that I think people need to remember is that you really need to have a real sense of skepticism these days, because people want money, and they will get money from you, and they will take money from you without telling you and proving to you that this opportunity is real. An investment opportunity is real, first of all, if there's a track record. If there's some verifiable basis for someone to say this will likely result, which requires looking at financial statements, financial information, maybe some information relating to the industry. If you're thinking of investing in a young upstart biotech company who claims they have the cure to cancer, you better start doing some homework. You got to do your homework.
I had two different patients that lost. They put their entire amount. I don't even remember that. It was a biodegradable diaper company up north. I think it was like Prescott or Payson. Do you remember that?
Mm-mm.
It was like 15, 20 years ago. The pitch was the landfills are filled with all these non-biodegradable deals, and everybody's getting into the Mother Earth, and so they a couple of my patients put their whole kit and caboodle in there. My first thought was, number one, that in and of itself is bad. Not putting all your eggs in one basket, and that basket being a biodegradable diaper, which, as you can tell, didn't affect Huggies or or anything you see at Fry's.
Yeah, well, it's sometimes the old adage, if it's too good to be true, it probably is, really applies to a lot of investment opportunities. And people will prey on others who they know will trust them, whether it's a social or religious group. The Mortgages Limited case I told you about, the particular bad actor involved in that case preyed upon a certain religious group that he was a part of, and that's who he had contact with, he had immediate credibility with. It's well known that Utah, all the other LDS folks, I am LDS, so all the other LDS folks in Utah are very gullible and susceptible to trusting people who they just have some other thing in common with. And they blow right past the skepticism you need to have. There's a case we were involved in a while back where somebody even represented to a bunch of folks that a bunch of piles of rock had hidden gold reserves in them that could only be tapped by an alien technology that he had developed. Alien, and that was the word that he used. So you hear that and you go, well, how could anybody ever believe that? Well, a lot of people believed it. And it's just surprising. So people just have to do their homework. Trust.
Another problem with the religious referral is that it seems like that's the way to do it. You go talk to the priest, the pastor, whoever. I'm starting my own business. I need an accountant. And he thinks, well, Jim's he's a member of our flock. Well, number one, how would the pastor know if the CPA was even any good?
Yeah.
I mean, he goes to your church, so he wants to be a better person, but he might be a horrible CPA. I notice that with doctors, with MDs. Every referral I've seen made to an MD with my own eyes amongst the public, I need a gynecologist. Who do you recommend? Oh, go to Lori. She's the best. And I'll just say, is she board certified? Oh, I don't know. You know where she went to school? No. Has she ever been taken before the Arizona Board of Medical Examiner? I don't know. Has she ever been, I mean, they're all just based on chairside manner. If I like my accountant, if I like my physician, if he's just fun to every time I run into, is like, hey, what are you doing? Then that's the referral. I mean, the referrals are very low quality in nature.
And you pointed out a couple of important things that people have to do their homework, not just about the investment, but also about the person they're getting to help them. State Bar Association has a way for people to verify whether someone's had a bar complaint filed against them, or whether it's been disciplined, I guess I should say. You don't always know if someone's had a bar complaint filed against them. But most of the professional associations and professions have something like that, where you can check to see if there are disciplinary problems with this person in the profession.
Yeah, and I can verify Rick as a great guy. I've known you forever. You actually, our paths crossed. You were working for the largest dental insurance company of the state back in the day.
Back in the 99, 2000, yeah. I went in and was the CEO for about a year and a half during a time when the company was having a claims processing problem.
Right.
And thanks to the work of a lot of really competent people, not me, but a lot of other competent people, we got that thing solved. So
That always makes me think of, they always say don't ever talk about religion, sex, politics, or violence, but healthcare is always a big issue. But they never do anything. You're talking about it was a claims issue. I mean, I still can't believe, like with Obamacare, I mean, it was a great, loving idea to get rid of pre-existing conditions. It helped me because I got 4 boys. I was able to keep them on the policy. But 30% of that cost is claims. And when my patients walk in, they bring a piece of paper. Then we have to have a human labor, number one cost, calling their human and going over their eligibility. And then if I sit there and take 3 receptionists and we all 3 call in the same company with all your exact information, we get 3 different stories. And I always sit there and think, Jobs came out with a smartphone in 2008. Why isn't there an app? Why don't they just come in when you go to the emergency room? Why don't you just open up your app and they just scan a barcode and they say, oh, that's Howard Farran. Here's his coverage. Here's, 30% of the cost is nothing to do with dentistry or healthcare. And it seems like government never addresses those costs, or even a nonprofit like Delta Dental. How come Delta doesn't have an app where they walk in and I don't have to have my humans call their humans? Why? I haven't seen any IT innovations in healthcare, insurance, processing claims. That's what we should start.
Sounds like a good app. Sounds like an important app.
And every time I go to the emergency room, I raised 4 boys in Ahwatukee, so the emergency room visits were pretty regular. And every time I go in there, they'd ask, I tell them my name, then they'd ask me my address. I'm like, how can you not know my address? I'm in here every month for 25 years, and it's like when I went to the Department of Vehicles. You do your deal. Every time you walk in there, it's starting with, well, who are you? It's like, man,
short memory, right?
Yeah, it's like there's gonna be so many innovations. So what about you're watching late night TV? You got this great idea, you got this genius invention, and you see George Foreman, who was selling you a grill the other day, and today he's selling you protect your ideas. Call George. If someone has an idea, you watch Shark Tank, or do you ever watch Shark Tank? Yeah. What's the first thing Mr. Wonderful's going to ask?
Yeah.
Did you get
is your IP protected?
Yeah. Is there any IP, intellectual property? What if someone's listening to you and they say, "Man, I've got the greatest idea since sliced bread," which hopefully it's a dental insurance app.
Yeah, you just disclosed a couple of them to the public.
Yeah,
so
please steal my idea. My attorney is saying, steal my idea.
If you have an idea that you think is valuable, that you have, that gives you an advantage over other people in the business, first of all, you should keep it confidential. Don't start telling every cousin you have about this great super secret idea, at least not the details of it, because you could lose your ability to protect it. So if you have a great idea, the first thing you should do is don't call George Foreman's patent company. Just talk to a lawyer. You can find lawyers who specialize in intellectual property protection, either patents, which is something, if you have something mechanical or something that requires the actual composition of it to be protected, so other people can't copy it and sell it. You need a patent lawyer. If you have a trademark or a copyright for something written, like you wrote a novel, you don't want to just start publishing it on the internet, because you could lose your copyright protection under a lot of circumstances. So you should talk to a lawyer who will get you to somebody who will file the proper paperwork. If it's a patent, that's pretty complicated stuff. I do patent litigation. I do not write patents. Patent lawyers who actually write them and submit them to the government to get protected are usually engineers, chemists, people with a technical background who know the ins and outs and who can describe the inventions and what it is that you're claiming in your inventions for it. So,
you know why they became engineers?
Why?
Because they didn't have enough personality to become an accountant.
Yeah, but they're smart people.
I know.
They're the people I rely on, and I get a patent case. I talk to the patent experts.
Ryan's grandpa's an engineer, and he's taught me some of the greatest engineering lessons. I always like the way how, if your friend's a dentist or an MD, they see everything from a healthcare perspective. Lawyers have their perspective, but engineers, they really have a different way of seeing everything. To them, it's not right, wrong, up, down, left, right. Everything's a trade-off. Everything's, if you want this, you're going to have to give up that. It's always, whereas a preacher would say, well, this is right and this is wrong. And a lawyer and an engineer's like, well, just here's what you're going to give. Everything's a trade-off in an engineer's mind.
Well, that's probably where they make good patent lawyers.
Yeah.
Find a way to make it work.
So if they had an idea, would they start with calling you?
They could, yeah. And if it was an idea that, because we're trained and experienced in identifying what we think are trade secrets. Trade secrets are things that you think you have an idea for that you don't want your competitors to know about. You don't want the details to be let out, otherwise they're going to take it and use it. Some recipe or something. You have a recipe for,
Colonel Sanders.
Colonel Sanders super secret.
What is it, 11 herbs and spices?
11 herbs and spices is going to be a trade
I'm not a
secret.
scientist, but I'm pretty sure one of them 11 herbs and spices is salt.
Yeah.
I'm just guessing.
Probably.
I'm pretty.
Or the formula for Coca-Cola. That's still a trade secret because they don't want it out. And we can identify it. We can direct you to the places that you need to go to get the right protection.
Do you think one of the original ingredients of Coca-Cola was coca leaf?
I have no idea.
A mild stimulant. I actually believe that. I mean, where else would they get the name coca? And
It
a
could,
mild stimulant. It's weird because when you say cocaine, people just have these immediate horror stories. But I've been down to those countries, and the people that just chew the leaves.
chew the leaves, yeah.
Yes, they get a small dose of cocaine, but like caffeine, it's a mild stimulant. But what's really interesting, it's an appetite depressant.
Hmm.
And so when they chew that, they can go out there and work all day and not be hungry. It's like, hell, America, 1/3 of America needs to lose some weight. But I imagine that trying to legalize coca
Yeah,
leaves in
you're
America,
not getting that past Jeff
yeah,
Sessions.
yeah, that would never happen. But we were talking about fake news. A lot of people are on social media, and when we were little, it was ABC, CBS, NBC. It was the New York Times. It was the LA Times. Now all these stories on social media, it's like worldnews.com. They have all these fancy names, but you've never seen a newspaper or a magazine. So how do they know when their best friend Matilda shared a story from International Galactical Interspatialnews.com, and the title sounds good, but you might know it's all fake? How do they decipher that?
Well, that's a real relevant question because one of the downsides to having this kind of user-driven information system we have is that everybody wants to be a reporter. Not everybody is probably qualified to do that. And first thing I think you have to do is you have to identify the source of what you're reading. Senate hearings today are confirming the fact that the source of a lot of the things that we thought we were reading that were legitimate news stories were planted. They were just nothing more than political ads, and they weren't identified as political ads. So you have to identify the source, and that's hard. That's why one of the reasons that the major news organizations, better sources, because they have editorial processes, they have vetting processes that decide what is and isn't printable. It doesn't mean everything that you see on ABC or in the Washington Post is true. You have to know what the source is, and you have to read the article. You have to read whatever it is you're reading. You can't just read headlines. And if it's the information that's in a news story, you have to approach each news story with skepticism. I'm trained as a skeptic because to prove things in court, you have to prove them. And if someone says, even a New York Times or Washington Post or whatever it is, Galactica News, they make a statement. I want to see the proof of it, and I want to drill down on that until I know exactly who said what, and is that a reliable account of this story. It just takes work, and that's unfortunately what people aren't willing to do these days. They read headlines. They read headlines, and they read their news in 140 characters, and it just doesn't work that way. Until we get that mentality shifted around, we're going to continue to have people lured away by just false things that are just really too wacky, too outlandish to actually be true.
Well, it sounds like what Putin is trying to do. There's back to the engineer. There's two ways to look at it. I mean, the two most organized societies I've ever seen, and I've gone to several times, is China and Singapore. Chinese Communist Party, they're all engineers. It's like 5,000 engineers. They've built 30 nuclear power plants since we've built our last one. We haven't built one in 30 years. And you go to those societies, and it almost, if you were looking for order and getting stuff done, and the Communist Chinese have created more wealth in the last 30 years for their people than any other country on earth. It almost thinks like, when you, as you get older, do you sometimes doubt democracy? I mean, do you think democracy is kind of, imagine your 5 kids at Desert Vista and Mountain Pointe, and the teacher said, well, I believe in democracy, so we're going to have a vote. Do you want to go to recess or study algebra? And then you go to the cafeteria, and the cafeteria lady says, do you want vegetables or pizza? I mean, sometimes, imagine if the warden said, well, do you guys want to be locked up, or do you want me to give you the keys? I mean, I go to Singapore and China, and it's like, that's more order. Then all these people are into natural. Well, if you look at all the groups of gorillas, chimpanzees, orangutans, lions, tigers, giraffes, there's no democracy. You got the 400-pound gorilla, and this is what we're doing. Sometimes does it make you, and so that's what Putin's trying to do, is destabilize all the trust for all these Western European democracies, to where one day people think, you know what, I don't think the average person on Facebook should vote. I think maybe a Singapore model would be better, because that's the model he has, and that's the model he wants.
No, I think that's it. I think that is what Putin has tried to do, and the Russians have tried to do, is to create distrust in institutions, well-established democratic institutions, including the vote. But I'm personally a huge fan of democracy. I'm a huge fan of freedom of the press. I think freedom of the press protects democracy. I think I like the buzz phrase of the Washington Post: "Democracy dies in darkness," and I think it really does. But it doesn't mean that every situation in life lends itself to pure democracy or pure democratic situations like the prison. Of course, most folks in prison, for at least temporarily and sometimes permanently, have forfeited some of their democratic rights. But sometimes we took a vote as a family. Sometimes Dad just said, "We're doing this." But as a form of government, local, state, federal, I think it by far is a superior.
You know what my first red flag was on democracy? Growing up with 5 sisters every Monday night. And we watched Monday Night Football, and my 5 sisters would vote for Bonanza or Big Valley or Little House. I think it was usually Little House on the Prairie. And I'd sit there watching Little House on the Prairie and say, this democracy thing does not work well for minorities. But when you go to media, there's even so much mistrust in the big media. Like, okay, you quoted the Washington Post. Well, that was just bought by the richest man in America. Jeff Bezos has more money than Bill Gates. And you're wondering, why is the richest man buying the newspaper in downtown D.C.? CNN, they only had one story. They convinced the whole country Hillary would win by a landslide. They only had one job for the whole year to cover one election, and they missed it by 20 miles. But what I think is the most interesting, which I don't really like watching news because it never makes me really happy. I'd rather watch Monday Night Football, and tonight I'm going to watch this Game 7 of the World Series. That's hell of a lot more fun than...
Yeah.
But some news story come out, I'll go to CNN, I'll watch them talk about it for 20 minutes. Then I'll flip over to Fox News, and it's like an alternate paradigm. Yeah. And so it's like fake news. To me, I think fake news is also Fox and CNN, and
it can be. And I think one of the problems that we have as a society is that we're starting to confuse opinion with reporting. If you watch MSNBC, you're getting a lot of opinion. You watch Fox News, you're getting a lot of opinion. They're commenting on the news. They're commenting on things that have happened. If I want to hear about the news, there probably are very few unopinionated sources of news in America, and that's unfortunate. That's why you have to kind of sort it out. You have to study it out, because it's filtered in there. Filtered in Sean Hannity's presentations are bits of news and a lot of opinion. Same with Rachel Maddow, on both ends of the spectrum. There's a lot of opinion, and too many people assume that what either Rachel Maddow or Sean Hannity say is news. That they should take that as their opinion. And I strongly disagree with that. I have a preference, which I'm not going to tell you, but I do the same thing with the person that I prefer.
You're a lawyer who's been doing this for many, many years, so they want to know what you think are good sources of news journalism versus opinion on bits and pieces of news.
This is how I'll tell you how I do it. I'll tell you how I find news. I don't just rely on one source. I will watch some MSNBC. I will watch some CNN. I'll watch a little bit of Fox News. There are a couple of folks on Fox News that I do trust. I will read New York Times, Washington Post. I'll read the local Arizona paper, Arizona Republic. I will read as many sources as I can for news. If there's a story that's being reported by everybody, more likely that's you kind of get the general sense of what the story is. But it's a literal news jungle out there. And for anybody who wants to kind of have an introduction into the problem, what I would refer you to is a few years back there was an HBO series called Newsroom. Jeff Daniels, Jane Fonda, a few other folks. That is it. Aaron Sorkin was the writer. Just a phenomenal exposition of the problems in news and what you need to really be careful about in news. And it will show you and help you understand the dilemma that news outlets have in creating news and presenting news, because it's a big problem. And you're right. It is beginning to create distrust. Who can we trust? What information is right and true? Was there interference with the election? Was there, this or that? How do we know? But I'm a big believer in trusting democracy.
And then it's also kind of a joke to hear all these Americans saying now, the politicians, how outraged they are that Russians might interfere. And I'm thinking, hey, who overthrew the Shah of Iran? I mean, I just go through all these. How many dictators did we prop up or knock over or topple? It's like, I'm sure those countries would have rather had a few Facebook ads than America going over there and toppling their leadership. You know what I mean?
There's a methodology that I'm sure Putin didn't invent.
Yeah.
Although I think he's probably perfected it.
Yeah, they say he's the richest man in the world now. They put his net worth at $200 billion.
Yeah, I saw that.
$200 billion.
Yeah.
That's
all the money's not in Russia, right?
Somewhere else. Interesting stuff. So how do these people contact you? What's if they got a question, and this is Ahwatukee Uncensored, so they want to know the price. If they had any of these questions, they want to call and talk to you. How do they contact you?
Well, they contact me at my office. My office number is 480-361-5230.
Okay, say that one more time.
480-361-5230.
Okay.
That's my office number. People want to just ask some questions and just talk. I don't pause the phone call and say, wait a minute, I can turn my meter on. You're going to pay me for this time, right? I will investigate and talk about things with folks before I actually start charging them. I think that's a fair way to go about doing things, because I'm a big believer in giving value for what people need. People have a legal problem, they come in, we'll talk about it for an hour. Most of the time, they don't get billed for that, unless it leads to a bigger case and bigger matter. They might.
You prefer it in person over than instead of phone?
No, phone is fine.
Phone is fine.
But I don't charge for phone consultations or phone calls. But I can't. I must say though that just a random out of the blue phone call is not likely to be very productive. I just can't give a lot of meaningful advice at random, at the drop of a hat over the phone, because it sometimes takes a little bit of thought and preparation about what is involved. So
And
I do actually prefer the in-person meeting.
Yeah, because a lot of scientists say only 7% of communication is actually the sound. It's the body language.
Yeah.
Are they gesturing? Are they crying? Are they,
Yeah.
So where is your office?
It's on Chandler Boulevard, 45th Street. You know where the urgent care is, right there on the south side.
The three-story building.
Yep. It's right next to that. Right next to the Ahwatukee Chamber of Commerce building, right across 45th
Oh, I
Street.
didn't know they had a building.
Yeah. Well, they're in the building right across from us.
So what's the address of that?
It's 4505 East Chandler Boulevard, and we're in Suite 290.
So you're on the second floor?
Yep.
And the Ahwatukee Chamber of Commerce has a physical office?
Yeah, across the street.
Huh, I figured that was like a Kiwanis or a Rotary Club or...
No.
It's actually...
Last time I was over there, they were.
Actually, how many employees think they have?
I don't know.
Huh, that is amazing. We'll have to go find that, right?
I mean, you know what I'm thinking about? Yeah, it's the Chamber of Commerce. Yeah. They came over and had an opening for us and gave us a dollar bill and gave us a big ribbon, and yeah.
Huh, and when was that?
We started that office, when was it, 2013, 2014? But I've been with this firm since 2011.
Yeah?
We used to be up in Scottsdale, but now I'm 4 minutes from my house.
That is nice, isn't it?
It is real nice.
Yeah, which leads to another question. The reason it's so nice is because Ahwatukee is the largest cul-de-sac in America, where you have 85,000 people draining onto I-10
Yep.
at Elliott, Warner, Ray, and Chandler. And so now they're going to fix that by trying to wrap the 202 around, which will have 3 more drains. Are you happy about that or not happy about that?
I live pretty close to Pecos Road, so I'm not real happy about it, honestly. I understand the need for progress, and I understand the need for transportation arteries. My main concern about it is probably too selfish. I worry about my property values, but we'll see. I can hear the trucks over there at night, so it's that close.
Yeah, and didn't you find it very bizarre that they had to tear down all those houses and churches across
Yeah.
the street from completely barren, empty land?
Yeah, well, there's issues with the reservation and everything else. So
But it just seems like a good mediator like yourself could have brought two sides.
nobody called me.
But I just do not believe. I mean, I have so many friends on the reservation for 30 years, and I have so many friends. I mean, I just can't believe that those two groups of good people couldn't have come to some agreement. You just wonder what the heck went wrong there. You know what I mean?
I know.
I mean, I got 5 sisters, and their longest feuds last, I don't know, 2-3 weeks. I mean, eventually someone can find some common ground. Well, is there? I can't believe we've already been talking 50 minutes. Is there any other subjects you think good folks in Ahwatukee listen to you?
Be nice when you're driving. It's not really a legal issue. We go to drive around other states, and I have 2 kids that live up in Washington State, and people up there just drive so calmly. It's actually kind of irritating when an Arizona driver up there. You kind of want to speed around them, but I see a lot of people driving really fast up and down Chandler Boulevard and around the neighborhoods, especially. It's really kind of terrifying when you think about how quickly your life can change.
Well, that's an interesting thing about how the human mind works. Like, in 2016, no American died in an airplane, but 30,000 died in the car. Yet almost all my friends are afraid of flying. I mean, I have some very good friends that have turned down free trips because they're afraid they don't want to die in an airplane.
Yeah.
Yet they're barreling down I-10 at 90 miles an hour, and it's a death trap.
Yeah, it is. There is one other thing that's kind of a pet issue of mine too, and it relates to the swimming pools. If you don't mind me telling you about it, a lot of folks these days have landlines. A lot of folks just do away with landlines and they have their cell phones. A lot of people with swimming pools in their backyard don't have landlines. We had the unfortunate and just terrifying and heart-wrenching experience back in 2012 of losing a granddaughter
You did?
in a backyard swimming pool. Not here in Arizona, it was in California. And
I'm so sorry.
it was just beyond torture. But my daughter-in-law, just one of the most amazing people you'll ever meet, and my son, they didn't have a landline in their house. My daughter-in-law jumped in the back pool, of course, as you would, with her cell phone in her back pocket. And it was heart-wrenching because she couldn't get 911. So that's a tip from Rick. If you have a swimming pool, keep your landline.
How many children did she have?
They had 3 at the time, and they now have 4. So they've gone on, and they've survived it with a lot of faith and family support and prayer. And
Because that usually ruins, 95% of all marriages, of death of a child?
Yep. But I have an amazing son, and she's an amazing woman, and they've since had 2 other kids, and now living in Toulouse, France.
Really?
Yep.
So do you, does this mean that you get a new vacation of
I don't know. They just moved there, so we got to figure that out.
Well, it's funny. Ryan and I, we were in London and Paris this year filming a dental podcast. And you know how they always say, the French are more rude and this and that and everything. I've always thought London was 10 times more rude than France.
Really?
France is they're always laid back, jovial, drinking wine. When they eat a meal, it'll last an hour and a half.
Yeah.
The British are more like the Koreans and the Japanese and the Americans, in a hurry, rushing everything, curt.
Yeah. Yep.
I mean, my God, if I had to move to one place in Europe, it'd definitely be Spain. Because that culture is so laid back, you just wonder, who built this whole town? You know what I mean? Because everybody, they, like Spain, I can't believe it. I'm talking to this guy, I said, well, what are your hours? And he goes, what do you mean? I said, what are your hours? And he goes, hours what? And I said, what time do you see your first patient? And he goes, oh, you Americans. He goes, I wake up, I eat breakfast, I read the paper, then I walk to work. I don't know what time I get. I don't know exactly what time I get there. And then their lunch is like 2 hours. Then they, you know what I mean? They're just and when here's U.S. healthcare scheduling every 10-minute increments, and then here's
And then
in
they're still
Spain
an hour late, right?
they're not wearing a watch, and they just I'll see you tomorrow morning. Oh, what time tomorrow morning? Well, when we open, I mean, it's just like.
Well, so far my
they're laid back.
kids love it in France. They love the French people. They love France. So
Yeah.
We'll see whether we go over there or not. I don't know. Probably.
Yeah.
He-
Oh, you have to see it. It's just beyond gorgeous.
Yeah. We've been there before, but this is we've never been to Toulouse. But he works for a company called Palantir, and they got him there in Toulouse. So.
So, what's your website?
It's Smith, SMITH, and then a hyphen, and then LC.com.
So www.smith-lc.com.
Yep.
And what are my homies going to find if they went to the website?
They'll find a description of what our practice generally is, a brief biography on each of the lawyers. I think we have 11 lawyers now, 12. We have 12 now. We just opened.
And how many do you have in the Arizona office?
We have 3 lawyers and 1 paralegal.
Really?
Yep.
Wow. Okay, so that's all there at smith-lc.com.
Yep.
Well, Rick, thanks for correcting the dental insurance situation.
Yeah, well, it wasn't me. It was a lot of other people, but
You were the leader.
It was a neat thing to be involved in. It was a real accomplishment for those folks, and Delta deserved to be back on its feet. So
It's by far the largest carrier in Arizona, and it was in tough times, and you saved it. And it's really tough because I've always thought healthcare, it's kind of a lot like religion. I mean, a lot of people have very strong emotional beliefs about
Yep.
healthcare.
I got that impression from
Oh my
being around
God.
dentists for as much as I was for a year and a half.
And
Dentists and their if they're married and they have a wife who works for the practice, I noticed that about strong unity.
And to me, it doesn't even make sense because insurance didn't pay for your house, your car, or your $800 iPhone. But when you need a $250 filling, everyone in Ahwatukee half have dental insurance, half don't. And the half that don't are just like paralyzed. Well, I don't have insurance. It's like, well, why don't you Google insurance on your $800 iPhone and you just bought a $50,000 F-150 pickup truck, and last weekend you went to gosh darn Disneyland. And when people talk about the crazy out of control costs in healthcare, not even 10% of the bill is insurance, meaning that we all pay a little bit in. We all pay a little bit in for car insurance, only maybe 1 out of 100 wrecks car. We all have fire insurance on our house, but I've only seen 3 houses on fire in 30 years in Ahwatukee with my own eyes. But when you look at dental and health insurance, I mean, okay, you got a sniffle, so you go to the doctor. Well, you went to Macayos last night and dropped 50. You want to go talk to a doctor about your daughter's runny nose? Why don't you just pay cash? Dentistry is a completely preventable disease. I mean, you don't. It's not like, true insurance to be like, I just had a heart attack, I just got cancer, I just got in a car wreck and broke my leg. That's insurance. That's only 10% of the bill. 90% of the bill is long-term chronic abusing yourself, behavioral deals. I got a question, I want to go talk to the doctor. But Americans just, more than any other country, they just, if someone else isn't paying for their body, they're not going to do it. Like China, India, Brazil, they don't have these things. You know what I mean? In fact, when I was in China, Chinese dentists, you can tell it actually almost causes them a migraine to think about dental insurance. I mean, they're just like, well, if you drink Coca-Cola and eat Hershey's chocolate bars and don't brush and floss, why would your boss have to pay for your filling? Why would your president have to pay for your filling? Why don't you quit drinking Coca-Cola? And if you do, brush and floss 2 minutes every morning, brush and floss. So when I hear all these Delta dental arguments from the dentists, the consumers, a lot of it, it's all based on emotion. I think all the engineers and accountants and scientists would sit around and say, why don't you guys quit eating sugar and brush and floss your teeth?
Follow my 6-word diet. That would help.
And what was it again? Shut the pie hole?
Shut the pie hole and swim, yeah.
Shut the pie hole and swim. Well, it was always very fun. I know I've interrupted so many of your swimming by trying to chat to you on the turnaround.
Always welcome. I just have my headphones in, so I can't always have to read lips.
You only wear those headphones so that Wendy and Jane and all those all the other people in the pool don't.
No, I wear the underwater iPod thing, little iPod Mini.
All right,
it's great.
Thanks for coming by.
You bet.